Simon, welcome to the show, mate. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
Do you want to just take us through your early days in business and a bit of your background?
I'll start with the background because the background is quite interesting. So I'm a product of the Adelaide Central Market, predominantly a fresh food market in the middle of Adelaide. And my father ran a fruit stall from the Adelaide Central Market, and my grandparents ran an Italian restaurant. It was the first Italian pizza bar in South Australia, and they opened that in 1957. My mum and dad met, and then dad was introduced to the market through mum. He's from Sydney and was a real estate agent at the time and decided to take over a fruit stand. So the market has about 100 stalls in it, predominantly fruit stalls. At the time, there was about 40 fruit stalls. There's a few less now, it's probably down to about 20, but growing up, there were 20 odd fruit stands in the market. And so dad ran that. So the background of that is quite interesting, as in we would go toe to toe in business against 39 other fruit shops every day. So it was really quite interesting, and everyone was friends, but everyone had to try and sell their fruit. And dad did really well out of that, put kids through private schools, and we lived a great life. So he was really quite good at doing that, and he was, a great salesman, and he had great marketing skills. And so I learned a lot. So we would be selling mangoes against other shops with the same mangoes, but we needed to find a way how we were going to sell them. So it was through presentation, or back in the day, we'd be spruiking, or it wasn't just price. I mean, price was a driver, but you'd have to find better fruit than the other stall holders, present it better. And I learned a lot through business that. And fruit and veg business is awesome because you buy today and sell tomorrow, or by the end of the week, you kind of know exactly how much money you've made for the week. So it's a great business, as in you buy, you sell, and you know where you stand every day, or within 3 or 4 days, because the fruit's got to move pretty quickly because the time clock's on it. So high pressure, and a lot of fun was had spruiking against other stalls, and having a good time selling product. An awesome time.
What was that like? You talk about that being fun. As you were growing up, or like that's your formative years?
Yeah, dad had that when I was born, and I loved working on it. So I started working as early as I could, just putting fruit out and taking boxes away. So that was very early on. Yeah, right through till dad retired probably 15 years ago.
Did your old man probably have the same perspective as you in terms of how much fun that was, or was that he was working to provide? Was it different perceptions?
He was working to provide, but that was the era of everyone was having a good time doing business in the market. There's a real community atmosphere. All the fruit guys were mates, even though they were competitors, which is really something great. Like, most people think of their competitors as enemies, whereas that was really a game, everyone against each other, and they would have a beer and sit at the pub and laugh about what they sold and what he sold and how well he did, and that was really quite cool. But yeah, no, dad definitely had a good time doing it, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's funny, like, because I think back to when I was a kid. I worked in my dad's earth moving business, labouring, and I loved all of that aspect of it, the banter between, like you say, different trades and different people, and it was the best part of it. But I look at that as it was fun, but I was having fun even though I was getting paid, and even as I got older and worked in the early days. But then I sort of was take a step back. Dad's still got employees and he's working, and it's real life for him, as much as it's still real life. But the banter, I think, is something that if you could bottle that and the fun that you have, because I know exactly what you're talking about in those environments where everyone's all in there together, right? They're all fighting the same sort of fight, but you have a bit of fun with it along the way. That's priceless. Does that carry over into your culture now of your business and how you try and do things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I feel like back then we would go to work, even now, but we would go to work and every day was good fun. So every day we were having a good time, and I really try and install that in my businesses now with my staff, and that is part of the culture. Is I want everyone to come to work and have a good time and be happy with where they're at every day. And that's become a lot more difficult as we become a national business and I'm not amongst the team all the time. So it's really where it kind of gets difficult trying to maintain that as the business grows. So yeah, that's one of the challenges we're certainly facing. We'll continue to face until we get good at that.
And so, yeah, continue with the background side of things. Sorry, mate. But it just reminded me of what I grew up with, and I know very fond memories.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so dad did that. Then the grandparents had the pizza bar, or the restaurant as it was. They had huge work ethic, always produced quality produce. And another thing, well, I'll just go back to my father quickly. his point of difference was always supplying the best you could possibly supply at a price that people could afford. It was really something super important to him that he would always chase the best fruit and vegetables he could find. And he would make sure it's at a price that was an everyday price. And then the grandparents were doing the same thing. Basically, they were producing what they wanted to eat at home. They were then putting out on the table. So that restaurant is still going today, and it's iconic in South Australia, and we're a very busy restaurant that too has grown. Those traditions are there and are still there and have been installed for 67 years now. So it's really quite exciting that that's still continuing. So I love the selling part. I never really wanted to run a restaurant. I didn't enjoy that as much. I love the business part of it. Always was getting involved in there where I could, but I was just drawn to the buy, sell, fruit, and veg part of, of the market. So in saying that, how I ended up in business, I thought I had so many more ideas from my father that you should do this, you should do that, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And he'd let me do a few things, but I got quite frustrated as I thought I could do it better than him. A fruit stand came up not far from him when I was in my early 20s. And I said to Dad, I'm going to try and buy that fruit shop. And that wasn't seen as a bad thing because we're all mates as fruit and veg, the other store. He was okay with me going in opposition to him. So it was really quite cool. We went toe to toe and, against each other. So I really enjoyed then showing him up in a way, and all the other guys who were my father's age that, I was going up against, and it was a real challenge for me to try and become better and beat them. So yeah, that was just an awesome time and awesome fun.
How old were you there, Simon, at that point?
Probably about 24, 25. Yeah, early 20s. So I'd gone to uni for a little bit, gone and studied accounting. It didn't last long as I thought. I loved business, even as an accountant, but I was really quite bored. So I went back to the market. And
there's a big difference between business theory and business in practice, right? Like it doesn't necessarily translate in the same sort of enjoyment. One's much more different to the other.
Absolutely. So I was running a fruit shop, and with the restaurant, so my grandparents' thing was that they didn't like any of the bottled pasta sauce. So we would spend all our summers, days, evenings when we weren't working in the market, we'd be there helping them produce. At the time, it was about 10,000 bottles. We'd put them into beer bottles. They'd all be done by hand. You'd have to stack them up in the garage. And, they were long days, early morning long days, making pasta sauce for the restaurant.
10,000 is massive.
Yeah. So, and we were only doing, a couple of hundred a day at the time. It was just an incredible amount of work was going into producing this pasta sauce. So they would take time out from the restaurant. My grandma would especially, and with a couple of other nonnas in the street, they would, put it together. And my mum and my auntie, it was a big family affair. Whoever was not working in the market would be down there helping out. And was huge numbers and huge days.
Yeah, 10,000 is huge. We'd make 500 in a weekend between 3 or 4 families, and that was a big weekend, 3 days, 2-3 days. But I couldn't imagine 10,000. That's unreal.
Yeah, it was insane. So it was a couple of years after having the fruit shop. My time was, becoming more precious, and I was like, we can't be doing this. So I went out and hired a commercial kitchen. A mate of mine was a food manufacturer, and I said, can I borrow your kitchen at night time? So I went there. I was able to do it in like a few days. I was able to produce those 10,000. It was probably more than that, but felt like a few days compared to a whole summer. I managed to convince my Nonna that this is how we're going to go moving forward. So the whole thing about parents and grandparents in business is they don't really like change. If they're traditional, and, it's very hard to get them to do something different. And that was a lot of my frustration with working with Dad. So I was able to convince Nonna that it was okay that we use this commercial kitchen. And one day she said to me, you got to promise me one thing. I'll let you make it. I'll come with you in a moment, but I'll let you make it. But you can't cheat. At no stage are you allowed to cheat. It has to be done the right way, the way we've always done it, with the best tomatoes. And, so this is something that sticks with me today. So, there's so many easy paths to cheat when you're a food manufacturer. Do we import a paste, or do we fill it with a cheaper, or do we add sugar? I was under strict instructions that I was allowed to do it under those conditions. Her exact words in her broken English, do not cheat. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. that gives you the guiding light for business there on after.
Yeah, pretty much. That was it. Yeah. So that's the words that's no longer with us, but I've taken with me. And then we're quite specific in the brand, that we do everything properly, and we use whole foods, and we use the best products we can use and produce the best we can produce. So I used this kitchen the first year, and the second year thought, I'll make a few extra jars and we'll put a label on it. We'll put it in the shop. We'll put it on Dad's fruit shop. Actually, we'll put it on Dad's fruit shop and see. I sold them within a few weeks. I made it 1,000 jars or so extra. And so the problem with tomato manufacturing and being a producer in that aspect was I had to wait another whole year for those summer ripe tomatoes to come around before the business could grow. So the next year we might have made 5,000 and we sold them within a few months, and we had to wait another year. So it's been a long time, but it was never my actual business. It was always just a project on the side that we would do this. So we did that for about 3 or 4 years in this kitchen. And then with some money that I'd put together from the fruit shop, I went out and bought my own commercial kitchen. And so we started to develop that. It feels like about 20 years ago now. Yes, around 20 years ago. And that's always just been a project up until recently, just a project, like a hobby that I did on the side because of the time it would take to manufacture every year and the capital that was involved and required to go from zero to hero was massive. And so it was just small steps and organic growth for almost 15, 20 years or 15 years.
Can you give us an idea of what that grew to?
Yeah, so where we're at now is we process over 1 million kilos of tomatoes a year with a national brand. We're growing at a huge rate. The more people that eat it, we have the more people that buy it. So our game now is getting it in the hands of as many people as we can, and we just have huge repeat loyal customers.
And in terms of the still privately owned?
Yeah, still privately owned. Yeah.
100% family owned?
100% family owned. Yeah.
So as you've grown along the way, presumably you've sort of had different points along the way where you've looked at, should we raise money, or people have probably approached you or whatever. What's sort of your decision-making process around outside capital and those types of things? Or is it just a very simple decision for you? Is that you don't want it? Or what's your thinking?
Well, I'm just very specific on what I want. I've never been able to work for anyone. I've only ever worked for the family and done it my way, or, gone off and done it my way. We've looked at investment before, and immediately as soon as someone tries to guide me down a path that I'm not willing to take or want to move faster than the way I want to move, because that might mean changing something about the way we do business, I always found those conversations to end quite quickly, and I just felt that it's something that I need to do for me. So I went off and opened up some other retail shops during this period. So I didn't just, so I saw an opportunity came up next to the restaurant where a food stall had a continental deli basically had come up for sale. So I bought that because retail was my passion. And then I opened up another couple of shops after that. And then stayed in the retail game and doing retail successfully for about 10 or 12 years. I still have some retail. And then as the sauce business started to grow, the food manufacturing started to grow, I let go of some of the retail. I sold off the fruit shop and sold off a couple of the other retail outlets. And I still have our brand, our store next door to the restaurant. But my focus then went to manufacturing. So then it became a whole new game. I knew nothing really about manufacturing other than what I taught myself. It was at that point that I then started to bring in people that were smarter than me, which I still have in recent years. I have my mentor and he's actually our national sales manager, Andrew Blaine, who has taught me about manufacturing and what the principles and the ways to go about becoming a successful manufacturer.
Yeah. What did you learn through that process from when you started? Obviously, when you're young, you look at what your dad's doing, you've got ideas, you should do this, you should do that. And then after a while, there's a lot of other stuff that you see. What was the biggest lesson you got out of that from when you started to now, sort of thing, that you sort of changed your perspective a little bit on things?
The biggest lesson would be I felt quite limited with retail. I felt quite restricted, as in took a lot of capital, a lot of effort to get to build up a customer following. It would always work, but it'd take a lot of effort, and you'd be limited by the people that are in the area or who can access the business. Then learn that manufacturing and putting the product out to the whole of Australia and the world. We go to, we go to different countries in the world. The growth can be endless.
Yeah, okay. And that part of it obviously appealed. You've got that sales background, and whether that's from professional training in sales or whether it's learned in the markets, which I think is probably far better. How do you take those skills? How do they give you an advantage in what you do now?
Yeah, that's what I love now. So now, instead of being up against the other fruit and veg guys, I'm up against big brands on the supermarket shelves, and I love that. Like, that's my challenge, and that's what gets me up every day. I feel like I'm up for the challenge of having a crack at being the best pasta sauce brand in Australia. It's going to take some time and without a massive marketing budget, but we'll get there. I believe in the product, and it's just now about me being able to use what I know to become that. It's probably not as easy as just doing it, because as the business grows and it becomes national, I don't have all the time I want to be able to sit there and just be the sales guy, or just be the marketing guy, or just be the maker or the producer. I've got to be all of them. Well, I've had to have been all of them for a long time. Now, as the business is growing, going back to what I've learned is I need to bring in help and people that are smarter than me at certain jobs, which is absolutely what helped us go leaps and bounds in the last couple of years. Just bring in people with better skills than I do at certain jobs, certain roles.
Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily smarter. I think it's one of those things where you're talking about people who've got the domain experience and expertise in certain areas that you don't have. That's the part that becomes invaluable.
And even if I did have them, I feel like I couldn't have them over the whole business anyway. So I need people with skills where I'm not necessarily going to spend my time to do those things. So that's extremely important. If we talk about what's made the biggest impact on the business, it's probably that, bringing in or getting the right people around me, creating a team that we can drive in the same direction together.
How many people in the business these days, Simon?
We're over 50 now, so not all full-time, including part-timers and casuals. So we're moving along. Yeah, we sell to Singapore and Malaysia, and we go into Arab Emirates, and we've done and doing some more business with the USA. And the Australian brand is huge. The world wants to eat it, especially in Asia.
What are the biggest challenges you face when you're looking to go from Australia into other markets? Obviously, that's huge upside, but not without its challenges.
Yeah, the USA is difficult just with all the food regulation and paperwork, and exporting is quite difficult on that front.
And from an export perspective, are there anything along those sorts of lines that sort of stand out from a sales perspective? And presumably that's your favorite part, is the sales part, the retail, or not the retail, but the getting it into the people.
My favorite actual part is producing the product. I love producing the product. Yeah, I love producing. I love the consistency of it. I like working in the factory. I don't get to do it enough, but I really love being in there and making sure that every jar is the same and on point. And I love it when we're getting better and more efficient all the time. So I love buying machinery, and I now love that manufacturing part of it. Can still produce the same quality at a better price and at a cheaper rate. So, and we've needed to, because of the price of everything, of inflation rate at the moment. We've just needed to spend money to make sure we can become more efficient, as it's not that easy just to keep putting your price up on a jar.
How do you go with the cost of living side of things? How difficult is that? And have you noticed that impacting in terms of either sales or the demand from customers in terms of what you need to be able to produce?
I think we're quite lucky. We produce a really good product. I'm going back to what Dad used to do. Dad used to provide the best product possible at an affordable everyday price. So we never want to be a luxury product, but we never want to be at a luxury price point, but we want to be a luxury product. So as the cost of living goes up, people are spending less time eating in. The figures show it and the stats show it. They're going, restaurants are really feeling the pinch, but the sales in our categories of sauces and the everyday items for cooking at home are rising. So as long as we can stay competitive, our category is really doing quite well in these tough times. People are happy to go eat a great meal at home, because a jar of sauce might be $5, $6, $7, but it's going to feed 4 people with a pack of pasta for $20, and they feel like they're eating a quality product. We're almost replacing the restaurant meal.
Yeah. I mean, that makes complete sense. If you look at cost of living, yes, people eat at home more, but if there's any one meal that people are going to be able to do comparatively cheaply at home, it's a plate of pasta, right? And like you say, the quality is perfect. I just came back from Italy. I'll never understand the difference between, I go out for a plate of pasta here in Sydney in a restaurant, the price I pay here versus I can get a plate of pasta in somewhere beautiful in Italy, and it's a third of the price. I'll never understand that.
I think it comes down to labor costs.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you look at the cost of labor today, we still run the restaurant. You look at how significantly that's increased over time.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's the cost of labor and the cost of energy. I mean, energy doesn't really affect the restaurant too much, but when you go into manufacturing and you look at the cost of energy today, it's having, huge impact on Australian manufacturers at this point.
And in terms of the strategic decisions within the business, is there anything that really stands out? Obviously, moving towards manufacturing, that type of thing is key, but is there anything else that sort of comes to mind?
Absolutely. Probably the first 20 years investing in equipment and machinery. The last 2 years I've spent investing in people. So bringing people so you've almost, when you invest in people, you have to invest forward. So much like a machine, you might buy a machine for $100,000 or whatever it might be. You're not going to get repaid for that for 2 or 3 years. Once you get your head around, I'm going to invest in this person for more than what I'm going to get return on today. And, the fruits of this person are going to come through in 6 months, 12 months, a year or 2 years. I think it just changes the whole game. So if you can choose the right person with the right culture and the right work ethic with, the right skills that I possibly can't give 100% of right now, they will help grow the business. So for me, it's just been that shift in not just spend money on machinery, but to spend money on good people. They're going to drive us forward, and this has had a massive impact on the business.
And is that something, when you say you're focusing on that in the last couple of years, is that because you've sort of come to understand how important that is in more recent times, or is it something to do with the dynamics of the business, or how does that come to be?
Yeah, it's definitely the dynamics. And then, as the business grew and we went from, 20 to, it's really I could see the problem starting to arise when we went kind of from a 15 people business to a 25 or 30 person business where I'm not amongst the teams the whole time. It started to show our weaknesses, lack of infrastructure, policies and procedures. And I couldn't find the time to do those type of things. Well, I was just busy, manufacturing and, trying to sell products and do what I do. And it was at that point that I realized that I need to bring in some expertise to help sort of shore up the labor and the staff and the culture, to keep moving the culture forward, as I was struggling to have the time to do that.
Yeah. And as far as you talk about your strengths and that type of thing, but what about in terms of things that you weren't so good at when you first started that you've sort of overcome? What are sort of some of those sorts of things?
Well, the first one that comes to mind, I feel like, is that I let go because the difficult conversation had to be had and I'd rather ignore it. And then that creates a real problem, because then you're almost accepting that, you saw something happen, or someone said something to someone and I let it go and didn't do something about it. That can destroy a culture. So it's really me making sure I'm having all those difficult conversations when I need to have them. Whereas though it was much easier for me to say, oh, I'm too busy, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. And, they can work that out when really they can't. So it was, as soon as I started doing that, it just had another great impact on the business. So I've had to teach myself to do that. So I went out and got some communication coaching, and that's how delicate conversations and situations. So I went out and got that, so I can just become a better leader and help people be who they need to be within the business. And the unfortunate part about a growing business is the people that were there at the beginning aren't necessarily happy grow as quick as what I'm growing. I've always been that type of person where I want the business to get better every day. So it makes it quite difficult to work around me, as I'm always all right, we need to get better at that. Like, it looks like we're doing it great, but I can see we need to be better at that. And it's hard to convey that constantly or get people to be on that mindset of, yeah, we're doing well there, but we can do it better, and we can do that better, and we can be better over and over and over. And it kind of tires people out and wears people out a little bit.
Yeah, and does that, like you're talking about there, that's really interesting, because I know exactly what you're talking about, where you've got a business of this size, and if the business to stay at that size forever, that's fine. The people in there at that point, if they're comfortable, and probably comfortable is the word sometimes, they would love to keep on doing it that way, because that's human nature, right? But when you've got someone with a growth mindset who wants to push and grow, either, I think what happens is people have to either have that mindset too and grow with the business and they'll advance, or it doesn't end up being the sort of place where they are comfortable anymore, because that changes all around them. And they probably want to go back to that comfort sort of level. But that's got to have a big impact on the culture that you're creating going forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It has a good and bad impact. When you've had lots of staff that have been with me 10, 15 years, and some of them don't want to grow with the business, it can be quite detrimental to the culture. So that's again why I brought in some HR expertise that we now have within the business, and operations managers, so we can help these people work through that, or help them find work elsewhere. Like, we feel it's not just about, if you can't do it, you've got to go. We'll help you grow with us. It's not always possible. That's that unfortunate part.
There's an element of that, like you're sort of alluding to, I think, is where you want to stick with your roots in some ways as well, but that has to include in that growth mindset. I think otherwise, the reality is, if you don't grow, well, in the end, no one has a job, right?
Absolutely, that's exactly it.
What's the best advice you were given along the way? Obviously, you've given me a couple of gems from your dad and from your nonna, but are there any other sort of pieces along the way that really spring to mind?
Yeah, I might have already kind of alluded to it, but the direction is always behind the hardest decision and the hardest bit of work. Like, it's almost like your growth is going to come from doing the things you really want to do, or the hardest thing to do. Once you break through that wall, the results are there. And yeah, it's like, you get to the top of the mountain and you're at the bottom of the next mountain type advice. So you've just got to keep moving. It's just a constant working with Andrew, it's a lot about that. It's, what are we doing next? What are we doing next? Not to get comfortable, really, and just keep moving forward.
And what advice would you give to someone starting out today in business?
I think you need to believe in what you're doing. You need to know where you want to go, and you've just got to go there. And I think if you believe in what you're doing, if you have genuine belief, so it's easy for me to believe because I grew up with tradition and heritage, and they stood the test of time. So I remember when I would go to all the food shows sampling our pasta sauce, there would be other Italians coming up going, "Nah, mine's better. There's too much salt. No, there's no skins in it. There's like I do it." And instead of me then going back and changing the recipe, that heritage and culture, I believed in my product. My grandparents been doing it for 50 years or whatever, and it's generations old. It's like, no, this is how we do it. I had belief from the beginning, sauce is better. And growing up making pasta sauce, I would try the pasta sauces, and I knew that they didn't quite taste, so they might have had sugar in them, or the tomatoes weren't ripe enough, or whatever that might be. So I just had belief from the beginning. And the same with my retail shops. I believed in what I sold and how I did it from the start. So really, I think my advice would be, if you believe in your product and you're prepared to do the work, the results come. I think if you go to work and do your best every day, if you actually believe and go to work and do your best every day, the results are guaranteed.
What impact do your grandparents have on the way you do business? Obviously, you talked about before your nonna, what she said, but they've come out from Italy, I assume, back in the day.
Yeah, Nonna was a prisoner of war in Shepparton, actually growing tomatoes. Yeah, and then just was so impressed with the country that Australia was. We had an abundance of everything, that he went back after the war and said to my nonna, "All right, we're going. This place is amazing." So
we're from in Italy.
They're from Benevento, just outside of Naples. A town called Pagoviano. So yeah, a small rural town. They were tomato growers there, and yeah, off farms. Both of them, both grandparents were from farms.
And what do you think you got from seeing them in business doing what they do,
Yeah.
and you bring through to today?
Oh, they were extreme hard work. So they led from the front. They did all the work. My parents are the same, extreme hard work. I think you can't. That's just such a privilege to grow up with a family that works hard. That work ethic installed in
Work
you
ethic. Yeah.
is just everything. Like, it's top of the list. So this is what I think about hospitality today. People, like, they're in hospitality. People forget what hospitality means, right? So you want to open a restaurant, but first you have to be hospitable. It's a hospitality. So what people would come to my grandma, she know what they wanted to eat. She would make them something. If they were sick, they'd go get a chicken soup or whatever it might be. It's about hospitality, right? So I feel like with all that we do now, even with the retail, it's about the hospitality. But that is my biggest strength. If we can be hospitable to people, even our customers taking a jar of pasta sauce off the shelf, if it's well labeled and it's great tasting and it's exactly consistently great, it's always the best, it's always tasting fresh. That is the greatest thing that I think they've taught me, is to be hospitable.
So that part of it is kind of fascinating, especially when you're competing against bigger brands that don't necessarily have that. I guess like in sport, it's the intangibles, right? It's how hungry someone is, or how much effort they put in, all those types of things. And I guess in hospitality, you're talking about in food, it's about being hospitable. It's about making sure things are of the right quality. Does that become competitive advantage, even though it's hard to? It's not necessarily tangible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still why Nonna's restaurant is still so successful today. It's at the forefront. And it's what I try and teach all the young kids that come to work for us at the shop. It's the customer is the boss, no matter what. Like, absolutely 100% the customer. Oh, but the customer said this. The customer is the boss. We're here to serve them and supply them with what they want and make them feel as good as they can when they come to us. And we tried to create, well, we have created, where did you try to create? We've created where the Lucias experience is a family experience. So people have been coming there for generations. It's still the same restaurant. We haven't changed in the same food for 67 years. So you can bring generations of families have come and they're experiencing exactly the same hospitality that we've experienced, their parents would have experienced, or their grandparents would have experienced. So, and then it's now looking to the future is we spend so much time talking about how can we, from that jar of sauce on a supermarket shelf, how do we then do that? Like, how do we create that hospitality for the customer?
Yeah.
Through a jar of sauce.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, what does that become in terms of, is it other products or other services?
There's definitely other products, but it's just the way we've got some plans around the way we communicate to our customers and the way we help them use our product and those type of things. So yeah, it's really quite exciting. I'm really excited about that.
What that changes in technology? Is that in terms of manufacturing? You've got things like automation, robotics coming through. Is that something that you get to see in your facility, or is that something that's on the horizon? Where is that type of thing within the scope of your business?
Yeah, so it's on the horizon, I would say. Definitely on the horizon. Little bits of technology that we implement now just through the cooking processes and filling and packing processes. But yeah, that's extremely exciting for us moving forward. Yeah, so it's just where we go and where we spend the money first. But that is definitely something that puts a smile on my face. It just enables us to be so much more competitive.
Yeah, because some of those sort of things are, 24 hours they don't get sick. They don't, there's lots of things that go with that, right? What about in terms of people in business that inspire you, or are there anyone that comes to mind along those lines?
Yeah, I've mentioned him before. I'll probably message him again, but Andrew Blaine, who works for me, works with us. It's my current mentor. He's very goal driven and very specific, and has really taught me about being very specific with my time, where you spend your time and what you're doing with your time, and where you're putting your energy will create depending on what outcomes we're after and how quick we want to get there, we spend a lot of time working out where I'm going to spend my time and how we spend my time. And we're very results driven. And he's taught me how to get the results we need, probably a lot shorter time than what I would have done without him. He was a food manufacturer himself. So I'm lucky enough to have, he's now sold, but I'm lucky enough to have him by my side every day. So it's awesome.
And how does that mentoring process, is it just ad hoc as things come up, or do you have a specific battle plan?
Well, I met Andrew during COVID, and Andrew had sold his business pre-COVID and was traveling the world. And someone I knew Andrew, and I was at that time speaking to a business colleague about, I really need some manufacturing help here, like which way we go, where we spend the money, how we go, what does good look like. And he said, oh, Andrew, I know this guy, Andrew Blaine, he's, recently sold out of his business. And so it was just started chatting, and he was happy just to have those conversations with me early on, give me a hand with a few things. And I said to Andrew one day, oh, why don't I'll put you on the books and you come give me a hand. Anyway, so he offered me some time a week and said, all right, I'll give you this much more time a week, and this is what we'll do. And together we've increased the business. Yeah, a lot.
That's incredible, because that's hard to find, right? In terms of that type of connection with someone that you really respect and that has the knowledge, and it's a match.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
And it's the same with, I have a distributor here. It's like our food distributor here in South Australia. Her name's Rachel. She's another incredible business person with amazing procedures and policies and sales techniques when she's out selling it. So at the moment, I'm blessed. I'm forming a fantastic team around me, and that's certainly what's helped drive the growth.
And what's next, Simon, in terms of what do you see in the next 5 and 10 years? Where do you see the business going?
Yeah, so we will be, the number one pasta sauce brand in Australia at some stage.
Yep.
I don't know what that looks like exactly, but we want to be a household brand. So we've got more products. We've just released some soups. We've got released some pestos. So it's more products and just giving people better food option than what's out there. There's a lot of room. It's really up to us how much we can do or want to do. But we really will become a household brand in Australia, right around Australia at some stage in the near future.
You're in every state now or not?
Yeah.
Well, Simon, thanks very much, mate, for your time. It's been awesome to chat, and I look forward to sampling some of the pasta sauce.
Yeah, I'll send you some.
Oh, mate, that'll be perfect.
Yeah, awesome.